says she needs a table because she needs notes. So she's going to go on the end. I'm going to go on this end. And Sadie and Tamara are going to go somewhere in the middle. And you can take the other two.
Okay, somewhere in the middle. So I'll get on that.
You'll get a middle, yeah. Good afternoon. I want to say this is rather remarkable. This is not even Bowdoin time. I think we're maybe 3 minutes after the hour. So we are kicking off this weekend of celebration remarkably well. I am Staci Williams Seeley, and I'm the class of 1990. I'm thrilled to be here with this panel of amazing Bowdoin alumni to celebrate AFAM 50, or I should say, hashtag AFAM 50. It feels especially significant to be talking with women today as we close in on another milestone. In 2 years, we will mark 50 years since our first fully coeducational class matriculated at Bowdoin. You can clap. And we are honored to have Sadie Smith, a member of that first class, here with us. I'm not. It's only what my notes say. Sadie and her female classmates were pioneers, to be sure. They came to a college that in many ways did not even realize it wasn't ready for women. And those women bore all of that not only patiently, but intellectually eager and enthusiastic and strong in every way, and they made Bowdoin better. All the rest of us, including our other panelists, reap the benefits of all of that smoothing of the rough edges, but we also have had to be strong, even as we have been equally intellectually eager and enthusiastic. We span a number of decades, and our Bowdoin experiences have been ones of different levels of diversity and multiculturalism here. We are proud polar bears, and I think all of us can rightly call ourselves pioneers in our own way. I remember being inspired by others before me, including Iris Davis, who recently passed, Wanda Fleming, Sadie, and others, both as a student and as an alum. And I'm happy to be a part of what I think will be a really inspiring session for you. While this session will concentrate primarily on race and gender identities, we have asked our speakers to touch on all intersecting identities that have come into play. And the first question we've asked them to talk about is a time in which how they identified was either affirmed or came into conflict here at Bowdoin. And how their Bowdoin experience impacted their adjustment after graduation and navigated leadership opportunities in their professional lives. And I said I would start with a story of my interview at Bowdoin to work in admissions in 1992, I guess. And someone said to me, I'm just curious about your Bowdoin experience and whether it was ever off-putting or isolating or disconcerting to have so many portraits of old white men on the wall. How did that make you feel about your Bowdoin experience? And I said, no different, I just expect to be on the wall one day. And I am. So I'm going to turn the question over to my fellow panelists, and we'll go from there. We'll have time at the end for questions and answers, we hope. And we'll ask you to come to the microphone so that what you say makes it onto the recording. And we invite your participation. question is this working? Okay. A question is about a time in which your identity in coming to Bowdoin or at Bowdoin was affirmed or came into conflict while you were here.
So I'd like to set the stage from where I came from. So I have 5 younger brothers. My mom worked 2 jobs. We didn't have a dishwasher until my freshman year at Bowdoin. So coming from having 5 brothers, being a second mother, and to get away from all of that, this was heaven. I was afraid, of course, because, not because I was the first class of women, and not because there were very few African Americans on campus, but more because I didn't think I was smart enough to be at Bowdoin, or have enough money to be at Bowdoin, because I was on scholarship and everyone in my family was chipping in $1, $5, $10 to make sure I would have spending money. And to this day, they all take credit for paying my tuition. But I went to Latin class because I had had 4 years of Latin in high school. So I knew I could do Latin 1. And after the first class, Nate Dane told me to stay after. And I was terrified because it was the very first day of class. And he said, I want to speak to you. And he said, have you had Latin before? First test of ethics. And maybe I could have gotten away with it because there were no computers. But I did, and I said yes. He said, how many years? I said, 4. He said, okay, so tomorrow you'll be in Latin 5. If you want to take a basic, I'll see you in Greek 1 the next day. That did so much for my confidence that my very first day of class, someone thought I could do better and really excel. So that affirmed that everything that my family thought that I was a genius, Nate Dane affirmed that at least I could take Latin too. But so that's my Bowdoin experience.
Hi, I think I was affirmed as a good student when Professor Levine, who was a history teacher my freshman year, said, how'd you learn to write so well? Looking back on it, it's like, why did he even say that? But I think as an 18-year-old, I was like, oh, okay. And then I think, once my report card came out, end of freshman year, and I had done really well, because my whole first year, students would say to me, either to my back or directly, well, you got in here because of affirmative action. And I was like, I think I got in here because if you took my race out of my application and compared my credentials to you, I was more than qualified to come here. And I certainly was, And then just on a personal note, my mom is Jamaican, she's West Indian, and she's very proud of her background. And so when I immigrated to the United States from London when I was 9, and when I came home, I guess it was the end of my sophomore year and told my mom I was going to major in Afro-American studies, she was aghast. It's like, what can you do with that major? And it all worked out well in the long run, but I really felt that I did not know the Afro-American, and at the time we said Afro-American, this is the early 80s, experience in the United States, and I wanted to learn about that experience because I knew whether or not, I told everybody I was West Indian. If anyone first saw me on the street, they're going to assume that I am Afro-American. And I tell you, having that major was really life-changing for me, and it gave me a whole new respect for the entire African diaspora. And it's because of Bowdoin that I felt that much more empowered of my African background. So thank you.
So my mom made that same comment when I told her I was going to major in Africana Studies. I came to Bowdoin thinking I was going to be pre-med, and went that route for like a semester, and then I was like, yeah, no, this isn't going to work. And so when I told my parents I was going to do, and my family's from Senegal originally, and so when I told my mom I was going to do Africana Studies and French, she was like, what are you going to do, fly around Africa and speak French? Like, I don't understand. Like, what are you going to do with that? And similarly, like, I am so glad I actually went into the humanities, because not only did it provide me with like critical thinking skills, it allowed me to have a better understanding of my own personal identities and how do I show up in front of people and be proud of who I am. And I felt like I got a lot of that through my experience at Bowdoin, whether it was positive or negative, because to the confidence building, it builds up your confidence. It allows you to know how to navigate different spaces that you're not usually in. And by different spaces, for me, it was being in white spaces. I grew up in Harlem. As mentioned, my family's from Senegal. So I grew up around people who looked like me, who acted like me, behaved like me, spoke like me. And coming to Bowdoin, so you have a girl coming from Harlem, moving to Brunswick, Maine, that was a cultural shock for me, but it provided me with the ability to just be more of who I am now and be more self-aware of who I am, and understanding that I don't have to change, whether it's my dialect, the way that I speak, the way that I'm super direct because I grew up in New York City, and people actually appreciate that, and I've been able to carry that forth in my career now.
Hello, I'm Crystal Barker. And that's really interesting. I want to piggyback off of what Sadie mentioned in terms of, I grew up in Arkansas, and I was pretty much comfortable with being in circles where I was the only Black person in my class. All my advanced placement classes were like that. But as Sadie mentioned, when you come to Bowdoin, it's a really interesting, I almost think of it as like a social experiment. You're bringing people from all over the world, from all across the walks, socioeconomic backgrounds, others, onto one campus, and it's an isolated campus as well. It's a very cold campus. And it's all, you're thrust into this, and you're trying to understand and figure out your own adulthood. And so for me, I came from a very educated family, but there was no playbook for what it means to be successful at an elite liberal arts college in New England. And I emphasize that because I grew up, my mom's a nurse, my dad's a small business consultant, very humble, supportive family, but they had nothing to tell me in terms of how to be successful here. So I went here, and I came and went to the hall there. It wasn't just like being the only Black person in my class. I thought we had money, and then I come here, and then I realized, I called home, and I was like, Mom, I think we're poor. And so, it's just different. So, and so like, you start to question everything about your identity. And I would layer that onto growing up in an evangelical Southern Baptist family where we sung church songs at school, which you couldn't do that. And so all these multiple identities come into question in the classroom. And that's what I love about it, because there's a tension there, for sure. There were some days where I didn't know if I belonged here. It wasn't because, like, most people assume, they came to me and said, you know, my dad was the first person in his family to go to college. I was like, wait, you didn't ask me that, though. And actually, my parents have graduate school degrees, but it's the assumption of applying statistical discrimination into individuals. And so for me, it was, what can I do? I didn't really have to prove it to myself, but what can I do to prove to others that we as Black people and as Black women deserve to have a spot at the table, but at a seat at Bowdoin? My choice is what I do best, and I love to study, so I doubled down on my academics, and I was a math major. I said, let me pick the hardest topic out there and just be extremely good at it. I was not good at mathematics, let's put it out there. I struggled, and I had to go to so many office hours. I was like one-on-one tutorials here. But I doubled down. I did all my weekends spent in the library trying to figure it out. And I was like, I want to be a critical thinker. I want to do this. I ended up becoming not just a math major and graduating at the top of my class, but I passed it back on. I wanted to make sure that I can also teach others and build confidence that they had in mathematics. So not only was I the struggling student who finally became the mathematics major, but saying, let me actually go into those circles with people who didn't come from traditional backgrounds and really help and be a mathematics tutor to them. So I completely agree with all the echoes here. It's certainly a great place for us to be and have these dialogues, and how do we take our personal struggles and figure out how do we advance the cause and help each other. Yeah.
My name is Marnita Thompson-Edie. I'm a class of 1990. And for me, I came from the inner city of Cleveland. So I went to all black schools. What is interesting, before I even got to college, I had a white professor, white teacher, Mr. Warner, who said, before you go to college, you're gonna make sure you know how to say the word ask. You're gonna get rid of the word ain't and all this other stuff. So he worked with me. And he said, your language has to basically be good enough for them to realize that you are pretty smart, that you're academically ready to go anywhere you want. I chose Bowdoin because they gave me the most money. One of 9 children. I was one of 9 children. My mother, she was divorced. So when my dad dropped me off, I convinced him to drop me off up here. He left me with $5, and that was the most I ever got from him or my mother after I graduated from high school. So Bowdoin said as well that freshmen, you don't have to work, but we'll let you work. I said, well, then I'm going there as well, because I needed to work so I can get anything and everything. Even though I did well academically and everything, even before I even started Bowdoin, everybody looked at me as if, what you said, I was only here because I was black. There was one student, and I'll never forget this, and I tell this to my son. There was one student, we'll call him John. I was, first semester, I was in the second semester advanced calculus, and Bowdoin was paying me, because I did whatever job I could take, to tutor people in calculus. And it was another freshman, we're both freshmen, and I'm tutoring him in calculus. And as I'm tutoring him, explaining to him, because he's barely passing calculus, John turns around to me and he says, is it true that the only reason why you got into Bowdoin is because you're black? And he was very serious. He couldn't understand how ridiculous that statement was. But, for me, I mean, I'm not gonna say what I said to him, but basically, and so throughout my time at Bowdoin, everybody just assumed that I wasn't good enough. I used to have I guess it was a actual math lab, math lab. And that was my sophomore year, I had a math lab. Bowdoin was paying me to just sit in a classroom, and when people came with questions, they would come and I would help them. So for a long time, I guess a lot of students were not coming, and the professor, I think Professor Barker or somebody came to me and said, hey, this student needs help. He said he can't get help at the math lab. I said, well, a whole bunch of guys would come in, and then when they would see me, they'll stay for a minute, they'll get up and they leave. And so that was kind of my experience, but I love Bowdoin. And as a African-American in the sciences, I did chemical physics at Bowdoin, and then my junior year, I realized I loved computer science, so I minored in computer science. But in the STEM field, you're gonna get that everywhere. Everybody's gonna think that you don't belong at the table. So Bowdoin just gave me that confidence to know that no matter what they see, the color of my skin, I'm still just as good as they are.
So this next question is interesting, because we're all talking about times where we have been navigating power structures. That's what we all did every single year we were students at Bowdoin. But I'd love for panelists to talk about times where that has occurred since they've graduated, and how successful you've been in seeking and securing leadership opportunities, and if that's changed over time, and why?
Sure, I can start with this one. So I'm class of, I guess you can't see it, class of 2008, so that puts me around 33 years old. So when I, doing the math, thank you. So as your math major, okay, let's try. I do this to paint a perspective of what it means to be a young Black female leader on Wall Street. So when I graduated Bowdoin, I had a very traditional path. I picked investment banking. And again, my theme is just work really hard, do the toughest thing out there, and then you'll build credibility. And there's two things that I learned in terms of navigating power structures, and I'll borrow a term from Carla Harris, who works at Morgan Stanley, is that you have two currencies. You have your credibility that you need to just get you in the room. You have that degree. You have a great degree from Bowdoin. You have to get your certain credentials. Maybe you're in a STEM field, you need to understand. You have certain caliber that you need to have. But then you also have your relationship capital. That's gonna help you get promoted. That's what people say when you're not in the room about you. When I first graduated, of course, I did what any young person would do. I just kept my head down. I was in investment banking on Wall Street, 2007, 2008, at Lehman Brothers. And I just kept I know, another thing. Exactly. I just kept my head down. I was just like worked all the time, literally through the bankruptcy, the weekend we went, I was in the office the Sunday before we filed bankrupt. And I was like, well, I have to get all these reports out to the clients. And that got me so far. When I got passed up for my first promotion, and I saw someone who sat next to me who wasn't as good as I was. I'm like, my presentations are better, my numbers are on point and I can do everything even better than they can. What is it that I'm missing? And then I started to realize that this other gentleman had gone to coffees. He stays after work and goes out to drinks. And I was like, well, I didn't get invited to coffee in other areas. And that's when that relationship currency becomes really important. And so when I started to navigate learning scene, let me get every credential because people think I'm the administrative assistant in the building. They always literally ask me where the bathroom is, where they can get the pins and other things to this day. So I have the credentials I went back and got my MBA as well. I pursued the CFA destination, I have that. I have the Bowdoin degree behind me, but also continue to build alliances within the company because when I'm not in the room, I wanna make sure that there's someone advocating for my behalf. So I had a rapid ascent within Goldman, and now I'm at Morgan Stanley, where with Goldman, I was working really hard and started that there was a need for us to bring solutions to everyday people. I was like, we're large organizations, can't we make an impact in others? And got appointed when we acquired our first robo-advisor. I became the youngest team youngest member of their management team to build out their robo-advisors, so their automated investment platform. And through there, just kept pushing the envelope, and most recently moved over and got asked to join Morgan Stanley, again, becoming one of their youngest leaders on that team to now build out a new financial wellness platform at Morgan. But each of these times, in terms of there would be times where I'd be sitting down and people would look to the person who reports to me because he's a white male, mid-age, and say, hey, what do you think about this? And what do you have here? And then he turns to me and it's like, well, she actually runs the group. And she actually runs the business. And then you will see the draw literally drop on there. So I think we're always gonna be in those positions, but it's like, how do we make sure, one, we have that credibility at the table where you're reminding people of why you're there and why you're actually running the group. But I think, two, of currently building alliances so that before you even get in that room, people will start to develop that reputation of what you have to offer.
That was great, yeah. I 100% agree. I think especially it's so easy to just be focused on the work and to go really hard. And I think most of us have been taught that that's the only way to make it, is like you have to keep going to the point where you kind of burnout, right, when you're working to that point, but it is understanding that the relationship piece is so important. For me, more recently, my name is Awa, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Awa Joe, class of 2011. And for me, the power dynamic and really understanding how to make sure my voice is being heard just recently happened with the new role that I'm in. I work at Microsoft, live in Seattle, and I am a global diversity and inclusion project manager supporting one of our larger groups at Microsoft, and that group happens to be the one where the president of the company, Brad Smith, runs, and his senior leaders, and I'm responsible for working with his senior leaders and the president of the company. So a part of that comes with a lot of nerves and getting anxious and making sure that, A, am I saying the right things? Am I using the right language? Or are they just gonna look at me and be like, who's this young Black girl and what does she know? And is it valid, right? Is the thing she's saying valid? Is it really true? And or if we do this strategy that she's suggesting, is it actually gonna be something that's gonna work out? And I think what's happened with me is I've built credibility before I even got to that team so that they know that the work that I do, not only is it good work, but I know what I'm saying, right? And I have my degrees to back it up. I have a master's in education policy. I have an MBA. I went to Bowdoin. So I have all those degrees to back up the fact that I know the things that I'm saying. But what's been most helpful is, even if you erase all of the degrees, is the people who've been going and speaking on my behalf. And what's helped me, I think, also is, and it just happens to be this way because Microsoft is not as diverse of a company as it should be, but most of those people who are advocating for me are my white allies. And so I think it's also being mindful that your allies are not gonna, in terms of like having folks being able to speak on your behalf and speak of the work that you're doing, they're oftentimes gonna be those who are of a different race, of a different background from you, and being open to that because there are a lot of people who are there to support and back you up, and making sure that you're also opening the door for them to actually do that.
I just want to mention that when I first graduated from Bowdoin, I started working at Procter & Gamble, and I was in sales management. And just like Renita said, her teacher was saying, you need to be able to say certain words correctly. I didn't know that there was a company uniform. And the way you present yourself truly says a lot about you. So I would come in my fancy suits and my fishnet stockings and my hair just, kind of out and wild, but I loved it. But at Procter & Gamble in sales management back in 1984, that was not going to get you promoted. And it took me 2 years to figure out what that company uniform was, which was, and some of you who are back from my era will remember, the little bow tie, okay, the button-down shirt, the conservative navy blue suit. Once I started wearing that uniform, all of a sudden I was recognized for my accomplishments. So my advice to you all out there is that you need to know what the company uniform is. And you may say, well, I'm not being authentic to myself, but sometimes authentic doesn't pay the bills, the student loans. So you can be authentic after hours and on the weekends, but during the workday, dress the part. And I would also say, the other thing I would say is, also take time to volunteer, because that is very fulfilling, and to give back to Bowdoin in your own special way, because you will also create relationships, and those relationships will help you both in your personal life and professionally as well. The school has given us so much, and never forget the common good, and you should carry that with you. Thanks.
I would add that in addition to knowing the uniform, you need to know your company's culture. And I worked for nearly 40 years for a public utility in New York. And mainly white men, all with electrical backgrounds, all engineers, and me. And once I graduated from Bowdoin, there was nothing I couldn't do. Once I got out of here, I knew I could do anything. So when people ask me, where'd you go to school? I skip right over Columbia Law and go to Bowdoin. And you would think that I would have been terrified of going to law school and going to Columbia. But it was like, that's got to be a piece of cake, because I graduated from Bowdoin with one of those Lordies. I'm good. So I was probably one of the first vice presidents of electrical engineering who didn't have an engineering background. So when I found out that I was going to be a vice president, that kind of kicked me back to the day before I came to Bowdoin. I don't know if I can do this. I cannot be the vice president of anything engineering or electrical or gas, steam, nothing. Give me HR. I could do HR. And I was truly terrified. And when my senior vice president told me I was going to be an officer, I was happy for like 2 seconds. And I said, I can't do it. I actually said, I can't do it. And he said, you're your biggest hurdle. You. Do you think we would promote you if we didn't think you could do it? We have to answer to the mayor of New York City, the governor. You think we're just going to put you in there for the heck of it? You can do it. So when I got there, like a week later, there was a letter in my mail that a group of employees had written to the board of directors, to the chairman, to the public service commissioner, saying how unqualified I was to have that job. And the letter said something like putting a nurse in charge of the operating room or to do surgery. It was really a horrifying, I didn't know what to say or do. So I was totally embarrassed when I got the letter. So I called the chairman and the president of the company, and I told them about this letter. I came in the mail. And the chairman said, I got that 2 months ago. And I said, well, and he said, well, and then he asked me about some issue I was having. So that was like, I can't have my team thinking I can't do this job. So on that very day, I put on my hard hat, I put on my work boots, and I went out in the field, introduced myself, asked all these people about what they were doing and how they do it, and could I come spend 2 hours with them next week? And I kind of turned it around. They didn't care that I went to Bowdoin. They didn't care that I went to Columbia Law School. They cared that I cared about what they were doing. So the only time I ever played my Bowdoin card was if I was in a meeting and then someone was trying to act like they were better than me, I'd have to say, I went to Bowdoin. Where'd you go?
We've touched on this already. This is a great panel. They keep answering our questions. But I want to talk about mentorship and sponsorship and how you found it and what advice you would give to those who are seeking it. Oh, Marnita, did you want to say something?
Or did you? I was going to say something. No, yeah, go ahead.
Say something. Marnita, please take the microphone.
All right. This is about the power structure. They forgot about me. And that has been my, you'll get that a lot. I was in the military, so you get forgotten sometimes in the military. Coming from Bowdoin, believe it or not, Bowdoin has a long history of military service. I joined the military after my husband, Nate, who's back there, after he got out the military, I joined the military. And I would say just being in the military, you're always dealing with power structures. You're always dealing with this hierarchy. And a lot of times, especially as an officer, you're dealing with that good old boys club. And it's like you said, I think you said it, they're going to golfing, they're going to the sports events that you're not invited to. There are some things that I wouldn't do. I mean, just being a mother, I wouldn't do it. So, I mean, you guys see it, what happens in the military, right? There are things that you have to decide as a leader, what you will do and what you won't do, and what type of integrity you will have. For me, one of the power struggles that I had was, I'm computer science, right? Computer security, cybersecurity, in which you're responsible for things that's above your rank. I'm responsible for a network. I have the responsibility to say, yes, this is going to be turned off the network. I'm going to shut this network down, and that can impact the mission that's going on for that base. And you have senior leaders who are yelling and screaming at you and basically pressuring you to try to do what they want. But if you know what you're doing is right, you just have to stand firm. And there's another time when your rank may not be high enough for what you need, rank as in whatever position you hold. There was another time in which I was second in charge, but my second in charge, being second in charge, I still did not have that rank to sit at the table. And there was a senior leader who said that she did not want me sitting at that table to discuss whatever topic. It was a major topic. You'll see some of this stuff in the news. This was back in 2011, 2012. And she did not want me at the table discussing what was going on, real world operations that were going on. And she refused. And so what I had to do, I had to get somebody who was 2 ranks above me to sit at the table. But before this person could go into the table to explain what was going on for real world events, I had to back brief him and tell him, look, this is what's going on. If she asks you these questions, say this, this, and that. And so he went in and was able to basically speak for me. But even though that's a frustrating thing, I had to still put on my big boy boots or whatever and still say that I'm still part of this mission and I have to do whatever I can to continue the mission. And so that happens a lot. And so now that I'm not in the military anymore, I see things differently sometimes, but now I can say yes, I can either say yes or no to things. So, and throughout it all, I feel that my integrity is the most important. So regardless of whatever power structure.
So the question, yeah, the question was on mentorship and sponsorship. They're both extremely important, but they're not the same things. I think a lot of times what happens, and I think this was my challenge right after Bowdoin, was not really understanding the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. And so a mentor is someone who's gonna, kind of be your like advisory board. That's kind of how I call it. And so what I've done the past couple of years is I've built my board of advisors. And those are people who I know, and they range in decades also. So I would say as you're thinking about building your board of advisors, don't just let it be your best friend and your family. Have people who are of different decades, who you respect, who they know you well enough, but they may not know everything about you. So whatever advice and suggestions they're giving to you, they're not biased or objective sometimes, or subjective. And so just being mindful of who's in that advisory board. And those board of advisors are my mentors. They're my go-to people for different things, whether it's ideas, when I'm thinking about something for the small business that I run, or if I'm thinking about switching careers, which I've done 2 times since Bowdoin, almost 3 times actually since Bowdoin. And I graduated in 2011 and I've switched careers 3 times. And so it's having folks who I know I can go to and ask them questions and just straight up say, hey, like I have no idea what I'm doing. I know these are the things that I love. These are the things that I want to accomplish within the next few years. What do you think? And while I don't have to take everything that they say and go with it, it gives me a chance to really think about things in a different way and also ask myself questions in a different manner than I would have. And so that's more of like the mentor and guidance that you could get from that. And I would say have a mentor at your first job. Have a mentor before you even get out of Bowdoin if you don't have a mentor. And I'm gonna put all the alums out here, hopefully it's okay, but there are so many, if you're a current student, there are so many of us who are around this weekend. Talk to people, don't just spend time talking to each other from your classes. Come and chat with us, find out what we've done since Bowdoin, find out the things that we love, the things that we're passionate about, and ask us like, hey, is it okay if I reach back out after this weekend for us to have a 30-minute conversation? And I will promise you, no one is gonna say no. People are so excited to talk to current students. So if you're a current student, that is something I would encourage every single one of you to do at some point this weekend. And when it comes to sponsorship, so sponsors are folks who, and we've kind of talked about this, they're the ones who are talking about you when you're not there. They're the ones who are talking about your work, about the quality of the work, and about who you are as well as a person when you're not in the room. So typically sponsors, what ends up happening is your sponsor is usually sometimes someone who won't tell you they're your sponsor, but they are, and you find out later on because they're the ones who, you talk to someone if you get like a role, and this actually happens at Microsoft a lot. Most people who are getting roles, internal movement, it's happening because someone is talking about the work that you're doing. Like even the role that I'm in now, I know that, I know who's the reason why I got it, and it's the Chief Diversity Officer. And it's because I went and like I had lunch with her and I talked to her about all the things that I've been doing, what I'm interested in, what I love, what I don't love. And she went and said, oh, I think Awa would be great for this role. You all should consider her. If it wasn't for her, I'm not sure who else would have spoken on my behalf. And so just be intentional in thinking about it in that way and understanding the difference, and also being open and sharing with people. And it's hard sometimes because it involves being a little bit vulnerable, but sharing with people the things that you love and you don't love, and when you're confused, being open and honest about that, because folks do want to help and they genuinely want to see you succeed.
Oh, I'll take the next one before you guys forget about me. So I would say for mentorship, I'll be honest, I didn't really have a lot of mentors when I was growing up. After I left Bowdoin, especially in the military, I didn't have a lot of mentors initially in the military, and it's only because, like I said, I didn't fit in with a lot of them. I had a couple of female mentors, but because we moved around a lot, I lost track. But I remember one female mentor, and she mentioned about that seat at the table and how difficult it was with the male chauvinist attitude. Sorry, the men in the room. But back in the late 90s and stuff, it's changed a lot. But as far as mentors, what I've tried to do, even though I did not have a lot of mentors, I tried to be a mentor for other people. And I try to do that basically with young students, young children, everything. I teach like cybersecurity. I encourage people to take cybersecurity classes. I teach at my church. I teach in the local community cybersecurity classes, volunteering, like you mentioned about volunteering. For young airmen, sorry, that's the word we use, for young people in the military, I've been their mentor and stuff. I encourage them by looking at their performance reports and stuff, telling them things that they can do to improve. So that's the only way I do like the mentorship, because I didn't have that mentor, so I know how important it is to be a mentor for others.
I would just add to another point in terms of sponsorships. We cannot overstress how important that is. The mentor is something you naturally kind of graduate, you talk to, et cetera. For the sponsor, they're going to put their political capital on the line. So part of it is demonstrating the value that you're ready, that you're really good. And so I have looked strategically at the kind of conversations you have with a mentor versus a sponsor. A mentor is, I need to figure this out. Can you help me? I don't know what to do in this scenario. And my sponsors are those who tend to be very highly visible and powerful individuals that you map out in whatever organizational structure you have. And these are the people where I'm talking about my successes and about a strategic decision that I've made, and I'm posting them or keeping them updated on. And I had to be deliberate on that because, again, I was very sore when I got promoted, passed up for a promotion, and realized that it takes an elegant navigation process around it. And they also may come from different walks. So very involved in the LGBTQ plus organization, and one of my first sponsors came from there. And I went to her and just talked to her about my passions for investing and how we need to figure out a way to get that out to Main Street. And lo and behold, like, she had some conversation with some other partner, then all of a sudden I got a call at my desk of whether I wanted to join the management team for this. And that's like the sponsorship. So I was coming in with ideas about how we as a large organization can make that impact. And she's having those conversations on my behalf and didn't know that that would be the catalyst of the person. So as you go out, even currently as an undergraduate student, or going into your organizations of saying, these are the people I'm going to get advice from, but these are the people I want to influence, develop a reputation of being a problem solver.
So our final question, and I want to leave time for questions, but this is one of the most important ones, especially as we're back here remembering ourselves as first years, second years, third years, fourth years. It's very hard for me to be on the quad without remembering times that I was racing to Massachusetts Hall to turn in a paper by 5 p.m. and the bells would ring and the second bell would ring, and I would think I'm going to get to that door before the 5th bell. And the question is what advice you would give to your younger self. And I'd love to hear from everybody here.
I don't have a mic. Get out of your way. That's the advice I would give my younger self here at Bowdoin, because I wasted a lot of time and energy thinking I couldn't succeed here and do the work. So weekly, every time I have a really good day, I thank Nate Dane, because he really moved me from being a hurdle to myself. So stay out of your way. Don't take all that baggage. Bring a carry-on. Don't bring a trunk. A carry-on. So that's the advice for Bowdoin.
You know, they often say that college is the best 4 years of your life, and I don't know if they were the best 4 years of my life, but they're certainly up there. I would say you really want to take advantage of all the opportunities that Bowdoin has to offer, because in many ways it's an embarrassment of riches. So yes, you have the academics and you want to do well, but you have so many leadership opportunities, and those leadership opportunities, you're developing these incredible skills that will take you so far in life. And it's not just about your GPA. So I made a major career switch. I was in corporate America for many years, but my passion was always teaching. So when I look back on my corporate experience, what I enjoyed the most was when I was managing and developing people. So made the decision to go into the classroom. And what I teach my girls, I teach at an all-girls school, I teach them that the person in the corner office was not the smartest person in the room or who got the best grades. It was a person who knew how to collaborate well, who knew how to lead a team, who knew how to communicate, who knew how to manage people. So it's not all about the academics. And yes, you do want to have a good GPA, but all the skills that you develop outside of the classroom, those are what is going to get you to that corner office.
I think for me is giving yourself grace, Because I think a lot of times we're, to the point that you made earlier, we're so hard on ourselves and we think we're not doing as well as we actually really are doing. And I think what happens a lot at Bowdoin, and I definitely did this, like I struggled my first year, both like because it was a cultural shock, but also academically. I mean, I had straight A's in high school. I was like, you know, I belong here, I'm gonna do great. And then I got here and I was like, whoa. Like, I was like, this is not what I thought I signed up for. But the thing that I think really tripped me up the most was thinking that everyone else was doing so much better than me. So trust me, the people who you think are doing 1,000 times better than you, it's a facade. Don't get fooled and don't get tripped up comparing yourself to others. Really give yourself grace in the process. And to the point you just made, like take advantage of the resources here. I definitely did not do a good job of that my freshman year. And it took time because I didn't know how to navigate Bowdoin. I didn't know what it meant to go to office hours because we didn't have that at a public high school in New York City. Like I didn't have access to those same resources here. And so give yourself grace, take advantage of the resources here, and trust me, I'm looking at all of you, you're doing better than you think you actually really are.
I love that. I would echo that comment. I would say it gets easier. So this is for a current student. It really does get easier. I think sophomore year was probably the lowest point. It's like freshman year was a struggle. Yes. Oh, there. Yes. Yeah. So freshman year, I just froze the whole time, so it didn't really sink in. Then sophomore year, you're like, oh my gosh, I have 2 more years. And then finally, you start to get there. It really does get easier, I promise you. So just remember that, like the struggles, the battles, the debates that you're having, you're putting on your armor, it will get better. As you enter, we talk about the struggles out in the world and other places. The thing is, it's always gonna be there, but your ability to deal with them, also you get new tools in your toolkit as well. So as you're going through and you're having a hard time, or people make comments or they assume that you don't belong here, like it will get better. And the more that we're going through this, the more we're gonna be able to like pull more people there. And the second thing, I get a lot of questions about this of people saying like, try to over orchestrate their career, like where direction you should go and other things. And what I just tell people is just build your toolkit, like build the most diversified skill set that you can, and just follow one step at a time. I mean, you can't really think 10 years, I didn't even know I'd be in this seat. I didn't really think I would be in financial services, and now I really love it. So it's one of just picking a direction, and sticking it out and building a diversified skill set, and you will find coming back to Bowdoin 10, 15 years later, you're really proud of what you see. So those are things. So remember, it gets better, and certainly good.
I would say to my younger self, take time out to do the stuff that you love or the stuff that you wanted to do. When I was at Bowdoin the first semester, I did field hockey. I only could go like two practices, and then I had to stop so I could work. I always regretted that I didn't finish the field hockey and stuff. My mother, when she was 65, she started playing tennis, and she did line dancing lessons, and she did roller skating, because she never had time to do it when she was younger because she was always so busy. So I say take time out to do the stuff that you love or do something that you have never done. There was one guy who told me, he was a 2-star general, as he was retiring, what he would tell his younger self, and this is something I always remember, what he would tell his younger self is this: in life there are rubber balls and there are glass balls, right? And you're juggling those balls. And some of the things you're like your job, career, etc., those are rubber balls. So when you're juggling those balls, if those balls drop, somebody else is gonna bounce and somebody else can pick it up. But you have the other balls, and that's your family, your spirituality, your health. And then while you're juggling those balls along with the other balls that are rubber, if those glass balls drop, those shards are kind of hard to put back together. You can put it back together, but it's a lot harder to put it back together. So you have to remember in your life, what kind of balls are you juggling, glass or rubber? So that's what I would tell my younger self.
I think we have time for one question. I just want to say that, just one, make it good. I think my advice to my younger self, and I think about Marnita and I were here the same 4 years, and I see my row of people back there, class of '90. I would say that a professor in the room who's very important to me, Randy Stegman, I would say ask for help strategically. One of the things that I don't think I ever did until it was sometimes too late was to ask for help. We were very invested in proving ourselves here and remembering that every room we walked in, we had to prove we belonged. And it meant that you didn't have space to be vulnerable and ask for help. And I didn't really learn how to do that here. But I know that when someone comes to me and says, one thing I'm struggling with is this, how can you help me? Nothing makes someone happier than their expertise helping you in one way. If you come and lay it all on the table and you're weeping and crying and from every orifice things are dripping and you don't know what to do, people sometimes have a hard time giving you help. But if you come in to them and say, I'm really looking for help with this one problem, I can't tell you how many times that has been meaningful to me as a person who's helping and to me as a person who's asking for help. So I would certainly give that advice to my younger self, even yesterday. So that younger self too. So we have time for one question.
Hi, my name is Journey, class of 2022. I'm proud of like Ella. So my question is, as a black woman, how do you assert yourself without kind of having the label of, I'm sure we've all heard, angry, disagreeable, loud, because I'm in like student government positions and like I'm very vocal and I'm very opinionated, but my my reputation is important to me, and I don't want to come off as, like I don't want to come off as a stereotype, or I don't want people to perceive me as that. So, do you have any advice for navigating?
I can't wait to answer this question. Did everyone hear it? That as Black women, how do we work against that type if we come across being angry or, and the word that I always get is the I word, which is you're intimidating. And I think you saw me stand up here. They had a step stool for me in case I couldn't get over the podium. So it's always been hard for me to identify with that and struggle with it for a really long time. And I worked to fold myself into the spaces people wanted me to be in. I mean, really twisting, turning for years. And I decided that the answer to that question or the statement when someone says, you're intimidating, my question, I sometimes ask it out loud, or are you intimidated? Because the reality is you sometimes will show up in a space in which you will be deemed intimidating by virtue of your presence and how you look to someone else, and there's nothing you can control about that. So keep being you, and keep studying, keep working, keep being prepared, and come across the way you intend to.
So one thing that I've learned over the past 4 years is that there are people out there who appreciate the truth. And my head of school will often come up to me after a meeting and she will say, thank you for putting your neck out there and speaking truth to wisdom. I think a lot of people are so concerned with being diplomatic in the politics that the bosses don't get the true answers. And people need to have those answers so that they can manage effectively. Many times in a faculty meeting, colleagues will pull me aside afterwards and say, thank you for saying that. That was on my mind, but I just didn't know how to say it. And I'm like, really? I needed your support, and I wish you would have said it. But somebody has to say it. And yeah, you want to do it in a controlled manner. You don't want to be emotional, but the truth needs to be spoken.
Yes. This question is so personal for me because not only do you physically, when you look at me, it's like you're Black, but I'm also tall. And so I'm 5'9", so I have a presence already when I go into a room, and then when I start speaking, I have even more of a presence that's shown. And it took me a really long time to be comfortable with that presence. And when people would tell me, oh, you have a strong presence, I used to take it as like a negative thing. And I would probably say like about a year ago is when I started seeing it more as a positive, because now I'm like, okay, this means that I have some sort of power. How do I use that? How do I use it to influence in a positive manner? And how do I use it to build allies and to build community, and how do I get people to see my perspective, because my perspective may actually be that of others in the room who don't feel comfortable sharing and speaking. And then also understanding that I live in Seattle, which is a very passive aggressive city. I don't know if there's anyone here from Seattle, sorry if you are, but it is, and it's very passive aggressive in terms of how people handle conflict, and that actually ends up showing up when you're at work. And I have no problem sharing my feedback and giving perspective. We call it perspective because it sounds nicer to people. And it's understanding how do I do that in a way that's productive. And I think one thing that I've worked on is making sure that I'm still true to myself when I'm sharing and giving feedback, but I'm doing so in a way that, again, is productive to the conversation and moving it forward and not backwards.
Here. Can everyone hear me? So I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank the speakers here for sharing their stories and for being open about the challenges that they faced, and for inspiring the students and alumni in this room to follow your ambitions. Next, we have, I think we're just after 2 o'clock now, you have a choice of visiting one of the 3 exhibition talks and tours. They begin at 2:15 at the Museum of Art, the library, and the Arctic Museum. So please enjoy. We can't wait to see you all the rest of the weekend. Thank you.